Hello everyone, we hope that you are safe and doing well out there during this shutdown. We are getting some really nice sunny days here in the UK, and it's kind of a shame that we can't be out traveling because it would be perfect sailing weather. I cannot believe how nice this spring has been so far. But we have been keeping ourselves busy in other ways. There's more videos to come. We haven't gotten to our trip to Tenerife yet, but there has been a big request for another catamaran video, and we had been holding off just a little bit while Matt was getting information. He wanted to talk to different designers and other builders, both pro and amateur, kind of like bounce ideas and information off of them, and now we've gotten that back. So we're able to put that into a video for you today where we go over the cost of what it would take start to finish to build an Oram 45. And just to give you a little bit of warning right at the beginning here, it is very long and it's a comprehensive kind of guide to all of the costs and our leading up to it. So we do have an Excel spreadsheet in the description box below if you just want to take a look at the figures. You can download that on your computer, and even if you want to watch the whole video, possibly in segments, you can download that and follow along with Matt as well. And I'll also, once he starts talking, put a little timer, like when he gets to the numbers, if that's all that you're interested in. Because as I said, he kind of does a little lead up to it, talking about what's going on around here, our intent to still build. I know a lot of people have been asking because the state of the world right now and the economy, which we, among a lot of people, have definitely taken a hit, which could affect things in the future for us going ahead with this build. Obviously, if the economy doesn't bounce back quickly, there's going to be a flooded market of good used boats. And so I'm sure a lot of you will be asking, instead of taking 2 years at least to do this build, why don't you just search the used market? There's going to be a lot of great catamarans out there. And yes, you would be right. If we're just looking to get ourselves onto a new boat, new to us, and we just had like a set dollar amount that we could spend and we wanted to get on something, that would be a great option. But as we've mentioned before, with the build of elements that we're on right now, even though there were times we're in the workyard and absolutely cursing ourselves and our life, we really did love the process. So that's why we want to do this build with the catamaran start to finish. Have something that is 100% ours. So even though I'm sure there's going to be a lot of good used options, we still want to go ahead with the build. And then another thing I want to just kind of touch on or remind of is that we never really had plans to start any of this process until late summer. We wanted to spend the spring and into summer in the planning stages, making sure by the time that we bought the plans, bought the kit, that we were fully informed and sure of all of our decisions. So even if the virus and the lockdowns and the destruction of the economy hadn't come yet, we would still be at this place right now if life had continued along as it was when we first made this announcement. So we're still staying in that stage right now and going through all of the planning. And yeah, I will let Matt take it from here. But just a reminder that this is a very comprehensive guide to every part you would need to build a catamaran. So settle back and enjoy.
In our last live update, we did talk about if we're still going to go through with this. And obviously, there's been a huge world-changing event going on, still happening, and we don't know exactly what the economics are going to be. We don't know exactly what cruising is going to be like in the next year, 2 years. So there's a lot of variables there. But what we're doing is we're kind of just steaming along. We know that our goal is to build this boat. Our goal is to build this boat, and we're still in that stage where we are gathering information. We're talking to other builders, getting as many facts as we possibly can, advice, all those different things to make sure that we're making an informed decision. It was always our intent to kind of purchase this kit towards the end of summer. So even before this happened, we were not planning on purchasing right now. We were planning on end of August, September type of time frame. A lot of that had to do with we still want to cruise here in the UK. We need to might sell elements eventually. There's just a lot of different factors that went into that, but that was the time frame we figured would work well for us, and we're still on that path. And we won't be making a financial commitment until we're actually there. So right now, not costing us anything to make sure we're dotting our I's, crossing our T's, making sure we have all that information and can plan this all out. So again, commitment towards the end of summer is when we'll be purchasing the kit. If everything works out in the world, we'll be purchasing the kit at that time and kind of figure out really what's going on then. Okay. Today we figured we would tackle kind of the big question on everyone's mind. What is this build going to cost us? We don't know for sure, of course, but what we've been able to do is, with all this time we have, we've been able to go through and kind of itemize a list. And how we've arrived at those numbers are, we've asked for direct quotes on a lot of things. So a lot of the items are actually based off the plans. So things like the rig and engines and sails and rigging and all those types of things are all actual numbers that we do have firm quotes for. The other things that we did too are, we used our previous build when we built elements. And obviously it's a different size boat, but we've been able to kind of extrapolate, take the numbers that we've gotten or what we used for elements for things, and figure out roughly how much more we would end up using on the next boat, the next build. So we've used that. We've used our previous information, and then the other thing we've done too is we've gotten just retail pricing. So going through sites like Defender.com, Fishery Supplies, things that are U.S. based, so it gives a little bit more accurate as to what it's going to be for us to build it, and using retail numbers, so things that anybody can buy them at. Now, one of the things is, when you do build a boat, typically the suppliers, so the places like Defender.com and West Marine and some of these other places, will give you a supplier discount. Even though you're building a one-off boat, you're doing it yourself, they understand that you're going to be purchasing a large amount of equipment, and they typically give you about 20% off. So what usually is recommended is to establish a budget and then allow a 20% extra for that to accommodate any overruns, any cost overruns. Some of that is automatically built into the fact that we should be able to get these parts less. So we're saving 20% on that. But another part of it too is, we have allowed kind of a catch-all in most of the categories. So things that we've just put a fairly high dollar figure down to accommodate all those extra things. So the mass amount of sandpaper we're going to need. We don't know exactly how many sheets it's going to be. We do know, when we've been able to purchase it in bulk like we did previously, roughly what that's cost, and we know roughly what we used on elements for that type of stuff as well. And with this being the fact that we're going to be painting the whole exterior of the boat, we've got to ferret, we've got to do a lot of extra things. We end up doing about 20 times what we used on elements as the number. So that's how we arrived at those figures. The items listed in the Excel file are not our final choice. Basically, look at them just as examples of what we could potentially purchase. The reason why I put them in here and was fairly specific is because it does give you an idea then as to the size needed and approximately what the cost would be. So again, they're just examples. Really, we're a year plus away from making any of these critical choices. So thinking of things like what specific battery pack we're going to end up using, what charger, even the engine choices. All those things are not specific to this build. So we don't have to make the decision yet at this point. It is something that through the planning process later on, when we get the actual plans and we figure out exactly what our needs and wants are and what the technology is at that point, then we will be making the decisions. We learned with elements not to purchase the things, basically anything that you don't need. Don't purchase it because it's on sale way ahead of time. The thing we found with elements is, usually there's about a 1-year warranty on items. So any of these things that you purchase, you have usually about a 1 year warranty. Now that starts, of course, at the day of purchase. We made the mistake of buying when there's big sales on. We ended up buying things like a battery charger and our VHF radio and all these different things, keeping the boxes completely sealed so we didn't have to worry about them at all, and storing them away. Well, by the time we actually installed each one of these items, we found a lot of issues, a lot of problems with them, things that didn't work fresh out of the box. And at that point, the manufacturers were, understandably, it had been past that year mark already. They weren't going to warranty them at all. So we ended up losing out on a ton of stuff that we bought. So all savings were gone there. And it just makes more sense to buy when you need it. So we'll end up doing that approach as well. One good thing with a stay-at-home order is it's given us a lot of time. Time to talk to the designers, time to talk to a bunch of different pro builders that have shared some absolutely incredible tips to help speed along the process. But the biggest asset is it's given us much time to talk to the amateur boat building community. There's a ton of people out there that have been down this path before, that have built their own boats, and they've been very open and in discussing all those different things that they found out, that hard-earned knowledge that they found out by actually doing. Kind of the way the conversation usually goes is they tell us the highlights, they tell us some of the negative things with it, but it kind of always steers towards the budget, how much time it took, what they estimated, how long they estimated it would take, and of course how much it actually ended up costing. We have talked to a few builders that have been successful, and they've finished the build quicker than what they thought it would take. We have talked to a few of the really lucky ones that were under cost budget. We did talk to a supremely lucky one that was both quicker and cheaper than what he originally planned. Once we whittled down all that information, once we digested all that info, we did come to kind of a common theme of where these cost overruns came from and really what we can do to help prevent us from going down that same path. What we saw is really you need to start with a good foundation. Pick a good designer, pick good plans, make sure the designer is laying out all those types of details, and then sticking to it. So the skyrocketing costs usually aren't spent building what the designer put down on paper. It's usually the extras, those customizations that we all want to do to the boat. That's where you end up getting a ton of extra hours on the build, and you end up spending a ton of money. So what our goal is to, before we end up purchasing the kit, we'll end up purchasing the plans. And what that allows us to do is that allows us to sit down with the designer then and go through and detail this build out as much as we possibly can. Figure out dimensions of the settee that we like and the layout that we like, all of that stuff. If we can design it in CAD first, then they can cut the panels out when they're doing the routing and give us exactly what we want without us needing to sit there, spend all that time scratching our head, building things, realizing that is exactly how we want it, and going through and modifying it. So if we can prevent ourselves from doing that and making all the at least the major decisions ahead of time, that's going to save us a huge amount of money. It's going to save us a huge amount of time, and it's going to give us a product, hopefully, that that is successful. Obviously, these designers, again, have built a lot more boats. They've designed a lot more boats than I have. So their ideas are valid. They've got a lot of great information that they can share with me. And it's really on us to think of these things ahead of time, listening to their advice, and then kind of planning on that or sticking to those plans. Now, don't get me wrong. We are going to be modifying things, I'm sure. So there are going to be things during the process that you just can't quite tell with a 3D model or a render on a computer exactly how those things are going to work. So there will be some things that we end up changing, but our goal is to get at least all the major details right ahead of time. And then if we have extra time, if we're coming in where we anticipate being in that time frame, then we can kind of allot a little bit more time to do a few modifications if we need to. And that's kind of the beauty of building it with these panels is anything you think of, you can pretty much build. So there are a lot of opportunities to change things. Again, we're going to try to get those all figured out ahead of time and cut and sent to us as close to pre-done as possible. And then we don't have to spend as much time trying to figure it out on the fly. Okay, but we're finally on to the actual numbers, what our actual budget is. Now, what we're going over here, that Excel file, is for the Oram 45R specifically. When you go through, if you look at that Excel file, all the things are relating to that boat. It is the lowest priced kit. It is the lowest price build option, and that's kind of the way Oram designed this boat, is to make it easy to build and to make it as inexpensive to build as possible. I did add some extras to the boat. So I took the Oram's base, what he recommends, and there are certain things I did upgrade that have brought up the cost further than what he typically does. But it's things that we liked, that we knew at a bare minimum, that is what we're going to want on this boat. So that's reflected in these numbers as well. To give you an idea, that the kits, the way that the boat gets shipped, the parts get shipped, are you get the panels, and within those panels are, of course, all the things for the hull, the cabin top, all the furniture. So even things like the shelves, the cockpit seating, all the seating inside, the bed, so on and so forth. All those things are all included within the kits. You also get the things to build the dagger boards and dagger board cases. You get the equipment to build, or the stuff to build the rudders themselves. On some of the kits, not the Oram uses an aluminum forebeam, but the other ones, they actually give you the stuff to build the forebeam as well. So that's all kind of included in these kits. You also get all the stuff to get it to the paint stage. So to build the hull to the paint stage, that includes all the epoxy that's needed. So Oram uses West System. You get roughly, I think it's equivalent to about 100 gallons of epoxy. You get all the fiberglass cloth that you need. So the cloth to sheathe the bottom of the boat, to tape all the seams together. All of that's included with it. The fillers, so the things that you put within the epoxy, so you mix within the epoxy to make the glue to bind it all together, to fair the boat. That, again, is all included in these kits. So when we're looking at the numbers, it's important to think that is to get the hull built, get all the major stuff done, but before the paint stage, and of course before any of the mechanical items get added also. So that's the kit part of it. In that process, we anticipate to take close to a year to get all of that done, to get it faired out, get it ready to actually paint. And then the next year is going to be painting and doing all the wiring runs, the plumbing, all those different things will be get done in the second year, and whatever's left over is left over, and we run past schedule then at that point. So we're at least allotting for that type of overrun. The kit pricing. The Oram kit with those items that I was just talking about is right around that 61,000 US mark right now, with the way the AUD is, so the Australian dollar is to the US dollar. That does not include the shipping to getting the kit actually to the US, or the plans from Oram himself, or actually the import tax either. So I do have those factored in there too. But apples to apples comparison type of thing. So that just the kit itself is 61,000 through Oram. Schionning is more. I asked to get a number to be able to say. They give quotes out to everybody, and they would prefer you actually to contact them for the number. So I don't have a number to share at this point. We did get a discount, I think. I don't know. I don't know what the actual number is retail, so I don't know if we got a discount or not. But I think it's a discount that anybody that contacts them gets. So there's nothing special there. But still not gonna to show what our number is. So, but anyways, it's close to the Oram number is what I'm going to say. It's fairly close. Their stuff comes out of South Africa right now, and is where they're building the panels. So instead of Australia, South Africa, the South African rand is way down. Currently, it's 10+% down versus the U.S. dollar. Australian dollar dipped and then went right back up to where it was previously. So there is some benefit with buying it from South Africa. It is getting closer to the Oram. There's still a pretty healthy difference, and that is one of the factors we do have to consider with which boat we choose. Granger is almost double the price. Well, actually, it is. It's more than double the price of the Oram kit. You do get the plans with it, so that isn't a separate line item. That is actually included in it. But the Granger kit is 134,000, I think, US. So dramatic price difference between the different kits. Again, the Schionning is closer to these numbers. Granger is just completely off and right field on that one. Left field, right field, whatever field you want to be in. So it's way off there. We really like the Granger. We still don't know. I'm going to try beating Tony up a little bit and seeing if we can get it down to a more or a closer price. But at this point, if it stays at the MSRP, no way am I doing that type of thing. That's just way too much money, especially when it's basically the same ATL panels as the Oram kit. So that is basically the kit stuff. That's to get your boat again to build up to the hulls to that paint stage. The shipping from Australia is roughly about $5,000 to have that it all packed, neatly crated, put in a shipping container, and shipped to a port on the east coast of the U.S. There's going to be variables there. There's going to be a bunch of other things, but that's roughly that cost. South Africa, of course, is going to be a cheaper price. It's not significantly cheaper, so I just anticipate it's about 5,000 either way. Import fees, again, that depends on what agreements we have with the country that we get it from. I think from Australia, it's difficult to get a hard and fast number because the way the kits come, it's not getting imported as a boat. It's getting imported as boat parts to build a boat, and it's a different category. And there's a lot of confusion as to what category it actually fits within, because there's actually a different one for power boats that there is for sailboats and so on. And a lot of it's going to depend on how we through the forwarding agent how we end up getting that in. But roughly it's about 1.5% to import the boat parts themselves individually. So that's factored into this number as well. The plans from Oram are 6,500 again at current exchange rates, but 6,500. That brings us to right around 72,000 for the kit delivered on the East Coast. Again, that's to build it to that paint stage. Now we get into the building supplies. We would love to build in a warehouse. We would love to have a heated warehouse with a crane hoist and all these different things, realistically, unless someone somewhere has one that's just sitting there and wants to let us use it for 3 years. That ain't gonna happen. So we are most likely will end up renting a lot, an industrial spot, or we've actually been contacted by a ton of people that have property in different coastal areas along the East Coast that have been very gracious in offering us use of their space. It does get a little tricky because we anticipate we're going to be there for at least 2 years, and could be a little bit longer than that. And we want to make sure whoever we do, whatever route we go with, that we have some type of guarantee that we're not going to be evicted in the first 3 weeks or something like that. So there's going to be we've got to figure out something with that. And so again, we will kind of go down that road. We would hope, we really, really hope, because it's a huge part of it, if we can utilize that free or very, very reduced cost lot to build on. That makes a huge difference, of course, in our overall budget. So we'll figure it out, though. That I'm not too worried about. We do know we're going to have to prep any site that we're at. So we don't necessarily need to have an asphalt or a concrete floor or base. We actually I mean, it is convenient, but we really don't even need to have it leveled. We can level the individual components when things are getting built. And we spent 3 years working on the hard in Indian Town with basically just tarps on dirt. So we are used to that. Not the best scenario, but it is a possibility. It is something that if we need to, that will be the direction we go. So we're not allocating a ton of money to the actual site prep for leveling or grading or anything like that, but we do know we're going to have to do a little bit of that. We will have to run, of course, electrical to that. We're going to need quite a bit of that. We are going to have to run water, most likely. We don't need a ton of water, so it could be something as simple as running a hose from something, a garden hose from something. It doesn't need to be drinking water or anything. So that is part of that. We will, of course, have those utility costs later on then of whatever we end up doing there. But we did allocate 5,000 for site prep. That will include running lights within the structure. That's going to include having fans, all of those basic things to get us going and having at least a workable building area. We If we do a lot somewhere or someone's property somewhere, we're most likely going to go with like a hoop tent. Think of like a hangar or a greenhouse that you see everywhere, but with white kind of opaque PVC covering it, kind of a tarp over the top of it. We've talked to plenty of builders, and we've actually gotten referrals for this, what they've used in the past. One a guy I think in North Carolina is currently building one. He's on like year 3 or something with it, and it has worked out really well for him. Hoop tent that is 30 by 60. Of course, it comes from China, but it has worked extremely well for him and survived everything that they could throw at it weather-wise. So it should be a good option for us. And again, 3,500 for that delivered. So that's most likely what we'll end up doing, is that setup. The utilities we spoke about, builder's insurance. Builder's insurance, I've sent out for quotes for that. For the past month, I've sent out quotes for that. I don't know if it's because of the virus and these places being shut down that I'm not getting any type of response or what. I know it's going to be a difficult thing to get, but I think it's going to be a little bit easier once we get a location figured out, and a time figured out as well. So once we have that kind of concrete, I hope to get it more of a response. And of course, we'll go and actually knock on doors for insurances, companies or agents when we figure those details out. I'm using numbers based off of someone in Canada and someone in Mexico that was building, and a gentleman in the US, but his is kind of just a rough number. So I did average was out a little bit. Obviously, US is probably going to be more expensive than it is in the other places, so they don't really work. His was just an estimate, so that doesn't really work either. I'm hoping that it's about $1,500 a year that we'll be spending for that, so I did put that number in. But again, I don't know that one for sure yet at this point. Tools. We do, as long as we can actually transport or ship the tools that we have on Elements right now. We have good routers, we have good jigsaw, I have 2 good sanders, a lot of just the basic hand tools as well. I don't know if it's going to be cost effective to ship them if the boat's still in the UK and we're shipping them to US, but we'll kind of go down that path. We do know we will have to buy a good dust extraction setup. We are going to have to buy more sanders. We're going to have to buy a lot of that stuff. So when I did just a generic Home Depot wish list type of thing, in the basic things, Milwaukee type grade, think of it that level of quality type stuff, ended up coming to 2,800, and that's with a lot of extras that I don't necessarily need. We don't necessarily need a table saw. And I was actually looking at like a panel saw and some of the other stuff that would be awesome to have, but don't necessarily need. Especially the fact that we're not dealing with wood, we're dealing with fiberglass, so you can fill things too pretty easy and straighten out those lines if you have to. But so that's the tool category. I think we're more than safe with 2,800 on that. I realistically, I'm hoping to be about half of that number, but I did put it in nonetheless because there's going to be things, ladders. There's going to be, a ton of tape measures, a bunch of those, laser level, all those types of things that we will need. There's things I'm sure I'm forgetting, so I wanted to make sure we had a good buffer there. Lumber and metal, we do we don't need much for basic lumber. We will have to get something to make the strong back. Basically, it's like a ladder frame, a wooden foundation that you level out, and then you can put the bulkheads on and build the holes around. But of course, it has to be straight, it has to be level. So we are allocating the amount to that to be able to buy the lumber for that. And then the Oram is a little bit different. You do actually, the forebeam is a metal pipe, an aluminum pipe, basically. That's what they use for that. And that is something that we can get from any metal supplier. Rough number in there. I think I'm significantly higher than what I need to be for that, based on purchasing a lot of aluminum for this boat. So I've got a fairly good idea as to how that will be, as long as those numbers haven't completely changed. But either way, it's not that expensive. Then catch-all miscellaneous category. So sandpaper, we know we're going to be using a ton of. We know what we used on elements, how much we actually used on this boat, but it doesn't really correlate because we have a bare hull. We didn't have to sand that down. Well, we did kind of, but we don't have to. We didn't have to sand that. There's a lot of stuff we didn't have to fare this boat, so there's going to be a lot of additional costs there. There's a lot of extra things that I'm not thinking of. The extra machine screws that are going to be needed. Those always add up way too quick. A lot of just the thinners and the vinegar to clean off epoxy and acetone and all those different things. That catch-all category. On elements, we ended up doing about 2,500 in those extra consumables, not including the stuff for the painting. And I think we're going to be at least double that with this boat. But we will. There's some of the pro builders gave me a lot of tips as to how to keep those costs low, and that hopefully will help us keep within that, at least that 5,000 category. So that's miscellaneous. So that actually gets us through our first build year. Kind of the beauties of this program is the fact that you write a check for the kit, you write a check to do the building, that kind of stuff, and that's it. And you're able to get that motivation by seeing this whole hull get built, see the structure get built, and then the painful part comes that you have to start writing checks for the mast and all those types of things. But that's the second year, and towards the end of the second year where a lot of those big expensive things come. So within that first year, we expect that we're going to spend just under 100,000, right around that 96,000 mark is what we have figured. How we're going to pay for the first year is we had enough money to cover that. Unfortunately, like everybody, the stock market, of course, tanked and went down. We rode it down and lost a bunch, so that boat budget is now sliced quite low. And we're hoping that in the next 4 months or whatever, before it's time to actually write the check for it, that we can rebound and get closer or get to where we need to be and still have money set aside for living expenses. We do still have some emergency money set aside as well, and we do still have a retirement fund from when we were working that we are not touching. We won't touch that until retirement, type of thing. So that is where that first month or first year's money is coming from. We don't have enough to, of course, then write the checks for the rest of the items. How we're paying for that is the sale of elements. So that's going to take care of hopefully a big chunk of that. Hopefully that market rebounds a bit too, and we can sell it for closer to where we need to be. It's probably not going to rebound 100%, but if we can get closer to where we need to be, great. The other part of that is, of course, if we continue to make videos. So some of the YouTube, they don't really pay anything, but YouTube, and then of course Patreon, and then the other part too is if the videos are successful, of course, we can hopefully hit up all the suppliers at Annapolis, like the boat show there, and get some discounts on things. besides just a supplier discount. Hopefully we can get something else we can motivate them a little bit, and that will work out, or hopefully will work out in our favor and help reduce some of those costs. If not, we get jobs. Not the end of the world. Jess and I, of course, we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't like working, doing things. So we may do boat deliveries, whatever. We'll figure that out. And if we do need to stop and work for a little bit, we stop and work for a little bit. It's not the end of the world. But it was the same thing when we were building Elements. Same program, same type of budget that we were going through. So that it worked out in that case. It may not work out the same way again, and we may again stop and do jobs, get jobs, whatever. It is what it is. So we're not worried about that. We have time. That's one thing we do have, is lots of time. So that's how we'll end up doing this second half. So just an explanation there. Okay, so on to paint now. Start of our second year. Some of these are going to actually need to be purchased within the first year. Some of the things like the high build and start of the bottom paint and those types of things will actually get done when we're building the hulls themselves, when we start that fairing process. But topside paint, most likely we'll end up doing all grip. We've used it in the past. We were successful at it, which says a lot of how easy it is to use. But most likely we'll go with that. But we'll have to see the dollar amount and how that plays into budget. I compared it to Sterling and Alex Seal and Hempel and some of the other ones that do produce this two-part LPU paint, and they all seem to be fairly close to each other in at least a retail number. When we start looking into the wholesale, because we're purchasing a large enough amount that we should qualify for a wholesale number, we'll see if one of them happens to be a better wholesale deal than the others, and we'll probably end up going that route. As it stands right now, numbers are based on all grip. The amount is talking to the designer and the square footage. Of course, they know the square footage of the boat, how much painted surface needs to be, and then adding 20% to that number of what the manufacturer recommends for coverage. So 20% for that, because we're going to have to be sanding out our runs and those types of things that a pro wouldn't do necessarily. And the other thing is talking to builders that have built this size of boat and similar design, to see what they actually used and allocating a little extra too for us. So that's how we got at 10 gallons for that. The 10 gallons does include the converter in it as well. So those are where those numbers come from. Again, the high build is going to be both inside and out. We will start using the high build when we're still building the hulls themselves. So that will have to be purchased before. So that one is one thing that we will have before that. Interior, again, high build, and then we'll most likely we used a Rust-Oleum one-part paint for the head and a few other areas on this boat on Elements. It has held up extremely well. It hides well. It goes on well. It is a very, very cheap, inexpensive route. And since the fact that we are going to be doing a semi-gloss on the interior, it will work well. It's worked well here for 4 years, and we shower in that area and so on. So we've abused it, and it's held up extremely well. So we'll continue to go that route. Roughly figured out will be, based on what we used on this boat in the area, roughly about 5 gallons should be more than enough. I think we need 4 gallons, and I put an extra bit for just whatever for those extra things. So that's the interior paint. Bottom paint, again, self-explanatory. Consumables, more sandpaper is going to be necessary for this, different grits, of course. A lot of the thinners and reducers and all those different things are in that category. Brushes, mixing cups, all those different things. So that's kind of a catch-all for those items. Talking to other builders, it seems to be a pretty safe number that we're at here. We're got a little bit of buffer there, so we should be all right. Sailing, the rig itself, the mast and all those components. Again, these are numbers that we received quotes, and they're not generic quotes. They are specific for the mast section that we need, that the building plan requires, or building plan suggests a certain mast section, the height, of course, spreader location, spreader length, tips. The mast itself was quoted with all the wiring ran, VHF cable. The even mast track is ran. So all those things are all factored into that number. Again, that's a number that I could write a check for today, have a mast delivered. Um, that's that number. So it is a factual number. It's a good deal, I think. So I didn't actually even bother checking anyone else, but this is the number there. Boom, same way. Standing rigging, running rigging, standing rigging again is just, it's a stainless steel standing rigging with switched ends, and turnbuckles and toggles and all those things that are needed for the rigging, based again off the plans themselves, so they are accurate lengths, to the millimeter or inch or whatever. So it should be an actual factual number. It's a number that I can again write the check for. They will cut them, build them, and deliver them. That's the price for that. Running rigging, same thing. It is numbers based off of the length and the height and all those things with good tails along the rigging itself, the running rigging itself, all Dyneema, so higher end things. It's a performance boat spec. It's not the full out race spec. $5 a foot stuff. It's a little bit less than that. It's one level down from that, but it's absolutely adequate, and especially it's more than adequate for the loads on these items. So that's that. The winches are from Defender. Just went to Defender. They're actually having their sale at that time, so they are pretty good numbers. But went through and picked what Bob Oram has spec'd for the deck plan. The primaries he spec'd are the 50s self-tailings. So that's the number for that. He did spec a little bit smaller for the Traveler winches. I went higher, so a little bit larger of a winch, a little bit more expensive, but better for us. Main sheet winch and the main halyard winch is basically how those where these numbers come at. So again, from Defender.com is where those came from. We hope to, of course, lower that number if we can work with Lumar or Harkin or Anderson or Antle or whatever. But if not, that's what we'd actually write a check for, or a better deal, maybe finding somewhere. Traveler Oram deck plan. So we went through and used the deck plan. The deck plan actually has all the numbers, the model numbers for specific items that are recommended. And how he arrived at that number is by using your main sheet load. So you can figure that out fairly easy by 40 knot winds. If you were accidentally had the full main up in a 40 knot wind, what would be the load on the end sheeting position for the boom? Calculate that number, add a nice fudge factor for a safety factor for that, and then you go through Harkin's website and you can pick out what is necessary to fall within that safe workload. And he's already done that. He has all the numbers for that. So I based all of this just by going to these different websites, pulling up retail numbers for all the blocks and the Traveler and the jib track and all these things. Some things I did go larger. I didn't go smaller than anything expect. Some things I did go larger just from past experiences. There's certain areas that I like to have a higher safety factor in than anyone would spec. More than what the Schionning or Granger spec either, and it's just personal things. But so I did go for a little bit different on that. But those are the numbers that I got for that. The Genoa furler, the jib furler, and the Code Zero furler, those are pretty good numbers too. They actually came directly from the rigger, the one that would be supplying the masts themselves, and they, I thought, were pretty aggressive numbers, especially when you compare them to retail from Defender or whatever. It's a pretty good number, but that's what you see here is something, again, that I would be getting from the mast supplier, the rigger themselves. Sales, got a quote from that. Now, we have a good working relationship with Precision Sales, just a absolutely awesome company, highly suggest them, but they do give us a discount, which we've disclosed before, but they do give us a good discount. This isn't reflected in these numbers. This is a different loft. I had them just to make sure I'm keeping accurate numbers. This was a quote from a different loft, actually South African loft, so it would come within the shipping container itself with the rest of the stuff if we got the Schionning, or I would have to get them from somewhere else. But this is, so for a Dacron Maine and Genoa and a nylon Code Zero. They are a good cruising weight and a good cruising cloth. They're not high end at all. They will be on this size of a mainsail. It would be fairly heavy, and it's probably, this is an area I think we'll spend a few more bucks. We may not go with a full laminate set of sails, but for the main, we may end up going that route. We may end up going up to a different cloth, whatever. A lot of that's going to come down to what our budget is at that time, and what kind of setup we can get with Precision. We're going to go with Precision again regardless, even if we don't get a discount, but because they've been just so good to us. But we'll talk to them too, and hopefully work down that number as well. So that's how we got there for the rigging and the sails and all those things. Engines. Now this is a huge saver. This is how we're saving a lot of money on this build versus a lot of other catamarans, because these boats are so incredibly light. We're at less than 13,000 pounds. You're talking for a 45-foot boat catamaran for the Oram, so incredibly lightweight boat. It doesn't need a lot to push it forward. There isn't a ton of windage. This doesn't have a high cabin top. It doesn't have tall hulls. It narrow hulls, so it cuts through the waves. You can get away with, and it's actually suggested to use the outboards. Oram designs that boat specifically around outboards. He's used it all the way up to, I think, a 60-footer, so 60-foot catamaran that is ran with 2 outboards. The benefit you get with it is, of course, it's a lower cost, so that is a huge part of it for our budget, is making sure it fits within our cost. But the other things are, they're extremely lightweight in comparison to a diesel motor. So you have that. A big part of it, again, these are performance boats, so you want to eliminate as much drag as you possibly can. Anybody, any monohull sailor, catamaran sailor, whatever, if you've had a fixed blade prop and you've gone to a folding prop, you understand how much of a difference it makes by dragging something like that through the water. You can imagine, for the monohull sailor, you can imagine having 2 of those and doing that. With an outboard, it allows you to raise them out of the water. So not only are you, the props don't need a fold, so you save money with that too, because those are expensive. You don't need to go to a folding prop, but you lift the whole structure out of the water. So you have nothing hanging down, creating more drag. It's a huge difference in performance that you get, sailing performance, that you get by reducing that. So that's one of the huge things, is the fact that we save a bunch of weight, which is important in a lightweight boat. It allows us more payload, so we can carry more stuff, more tools or food or water or whatever, if we can reduce some of that engine weight. It allows us that. We can, of course, take them out. So if we need to maintain them, if there's some issue, instead of having to do it within the hull, you pull them completely out, throw them on the dock, throw them in a car, bring them to a mechanic if you need to, or for warranty, you can actually bring them that way. Anybody can work on them. I mean, even the new 4-stroke ones, some of the new ones are a little bit different, but they're simple to work on. Of course, I've always worked on diesels. I've always had reliable diesels. Those are easy to work on as well. But it's at least it's another option, another thing for that, for the maintenance part of it. So we get it out of the water. We don't have to worry about electricity or straight current or anything like that. No metals in the water then whatsoever. So that's a benefit with it. There's just a lot of things that make sense in this type of boat. I wouldn't have outboards in a lagoon or a Fountain Pajot or something that is more of a dedicated cruiser, comfort cruiser, because they weigh more, there's more windage, those types of things. For that scenario, absolutely inboard diesel engines make sense. This scenario, this specific type of boat, is where outboards rule. It will affect resale value, but anyone that would be looking at this boat anyway, it's just like Elements. You know, this is not a mass-produced boat that we're in right now. It's not going to appeal to every single sailor, of course. We've already whittled down to a fairly small subset or small group of people that would like this boat. It's going to be the same thing with the next boat. And the people that are going to want a sport boat, a lot of times they want those types of things. So they want outboards. It is the direction that market On the lower end market, that's the direction that they're going towards because of the reasons I listed. The upper end, of course, they're going to all different kinds of fancy things that we just don't have the budget for. And yeah, so I mean that's kind of a part of it too. Again, as budget. But so that's our engine choice is going to be outboards most likely. The Oram again is designed for that. We could do electric outboards too, but we'll see. You sail so much more and you use the engine so much less in these boats because they point extremely well. They sail to windward well. They just sail so much better that to invest the money in an electric motor in a boat that you anticipate sailing more, it's harder to justify it versus doing an outboard because the cost is so incredibly low. And yeah, we'll get into that. We'll talk about propulsion systems more later when we get closer to that point. Steering system. Steering system on these, you of course you build the rudder, you build the rudder shaft, you build all those components for the boat itself within the kit. To connect the rudders together, you have to weld up aluminum or stainless if you want to go that route, but we'll do aluminum, of course. Weld that up to make a tie rod for that. It's they're balanced rudders. They steer extremely well. They steer efficiently. You don't need a huge hydraulic system for this type of boat. You can get away with making your own quadrant. So instead of having to buy an Edson or anything like that, you can actually make your own quadrant, which is a lot of times stronger and easier to repair because you've built it yourself, you know how it works. So we'll most likely build our own quadrant, use Dyneema to run the lines for that, so no stainless steel with that. All of that gets built. You build the pedestals themselves, are all things that you do, and it's an inexpensive way to do it. It makes it for a very strong system, and you know it inside and out, of course, too. So that's it is an inexpensive way to do it, and that's why we're kind of going that route too. But so we do have that figured in there, all the welding needed, so on, to build the tie rod system. And that's pretty much it for steering. We will need to buy wheels. You can actually make your own wheels as well. We may go that route, but it's hard to justify the cost to not just buy stock ready wheels. There's a lot of those on eBay. If you look, there's a lot of things available, so we'll probably end up just purchasing those. It's one of the things with the shutdown, stay-at-home program thing. In fact, I haven't talked a ton, so I am easily losing my voice here. This is a lot more of the talking than I've done in a long time. Okay, electrical system. Okay, so now we're on to the electrical system. This is we need to keep this boat lightweight, so it really makes sense to go to lithium-ion for this boat. Of course, technology has changed, all that type of stuff. It just makes sense in general anyway, if you can spend the money for that, the extra cost for that. But the other thing too is it's, again, the weight scenario, and it's going to come down to some of the other choices that we made as to our galley, and why lithium is going to make sense. So the number that you see for the batteries are based on just doing the Winston cells. The reliable system, I've actually built one of the systems before, so it's simple and easy to do. We just didn't do it on this boat because we didn't have the budget at that time to do it. So that's where that number comes from. 300 amp hours, a little light. I would like to do at least 400. We'll see where the pricing are of those cells at that time, of course, and see where our budget is as to what direction we end up going to that. Nice part with this is the fact that you can add capacity later as needed. Most people don't, because once you make that additional investment, it's hard to write a check again. But with the amount of solar that we will have, again, and our daily usage, I would like to have that bumped up just a little bit. We'll see if we can do that. So that's a variable there. Lead acid starter batteries. We'll need, of course, starter batteries to start the outboards. But that will most likely, we'll see. We may have it start off the house bank. But the lead acid is good as just having a good buffer for the solar and for the charger and everything else, to have that dump into that versus into the the lithium bank. So that's what those lead acids are there for. The charging system, the one negative with having outboard power is they don't have large alternators, of course. They've gotten better. Some of them actually do have real alternators on them now, even down into the 20 and 25 horsepower mark. Honda has larger capacity. Evinrude has larger capacity. So they are getting better there. But that isn't going to be our prime way to generate power. Our prime is going to be, of course, solar. So I did put just generic hard panels in that. We've had good luck with the ones that we've gotten from a place in Miami. They're kind of grade B type of thing, solar panels, but we've done it in the past. We've used them on other boats, other setups, and it's worked out well. It's what we have on Elements right now. And for, you can typically get them less than $1 a watt. So I do have 1,000 watts figured in there. Oram has it planned for 800, at least on the cabin top. There's still a lot of leftover space that you could fill. And then over the davits, we could do another 300 watt panel or 400 watt at that time. So we'll, again, evaluate it as to how much we do. Of course, that is going to make a difference with our charge controllers as to the number that we need, how many of those we actually need, their capacity that we need. Right now I have it based on at least 1,000 watts split into two different sets for either side of the boom, so for shadowing and so on. That is that number. Charger is an inverter charger. Victron, most likely we'll end up going the Victron route. It's I think probably one of the best right now, but in a year and a half or 2 years when we're buying this, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen with the pricing of these things? So again, just an example as to the size that we're looking at for a charging system. That's in there. The charger is sized based more on the inverter that we're going to need or want than it is necessarily on the charger, because we don't plan on being plugged in that often. So the charger part isn't that big of a deal. Right now we have a separate charger and a separate inverter. I actually like that program better, and we may end up going that route again too. So again, just an example there for those items. Wiring, I did make a rough, really rough wiring diagram. That was more just to figure out how many runs we would need from different things, where I expect the lighting to need to be, where I expect switches to need to be, those things, the power ran to the galley, so on and so forth. Did a real rough number on that. And the layouts are similar enough that the one for the Oram is going to be similar to the one for the Schionning. It's going to be similar to the one for the Granger too. So it gives me a rough idea. The amount of wire figured in here is with a large fudge factor, a large extra in it, but it is based on duplex wire. So 2 wires ran within a protective sheath. We did that on Elements just because even running through the conduit on an aluminum boat, you want as much protection as possible, so as many layers of protection as possible. Won't be doing that on this boat because it weighs more, it costs more, so we'll do primary wires ran the whole way. So that will actually bring down that cost as well. They are all tinned, based on tinned wire, Achor wire. We've always used that, so it's something that we've always used. There's a few other brands that we've used as well, but we will continue down that road too. The heavy wires, I did base it on 1/0 wires. So I did base the longer, that 160 feet of 1/0 on what our largest draw is and what our longest run is going to be. And to have that, which is going to be for the Anchor windlass, most likely will be the longest run. And then to the circuit panel, to the inverter, those types of things are figured in there. We found before it's much cheaper to purchase in bulk, to buy a full roll of, depending on what gauge it is, but to buy a 100-foot section or a 50-foot section than it is to buy individual pieces. And so that's kind of just based on that. Buy the largest that you need in bulk, and then you can use it up to a certain point. You can use it for, that would typically require smaller wires. It does add a little bit more weight, but it does give you voltage or less voltage drop too. So it ends up being a kind of a win situation. So that's figured in there. I have wire figured for a run from the solar panels. Extra wire for that. The AC run, have that figured in there as well. These again are very, very rough numbers, but it should give us enough padding to order the wires. These are also based on the numbers, again, of what we spent on elements. We did get a wholesale account for that, for the electrical, a lot of the electrical, and those numbers are based on closer to my wholesale number than they are on a normal retail number. So that's kind of where those things came from. Circuit panel, Blue Sea, self-explanatory. Bus bars, all the extra strips, that's kind of a catch-all program. We're high there. We've got more than what we necessarily need. And we have a lot more than what we necessarily need because I have majority of the components already. As long as I can take some of the stuff from here and ship back to the US, or if we bring the boat back to the US, we've got spares for everything on the boat, but we have spares on top of spares for a lot of the electrical system. I bought grosses of things. And so I have all of those major components pretty much already on hand. There is going to be, of course, some few extra things relating to the lithium battery pack that I will have to buy separate. So I did want to add a buffer in there for that. So that's where that number comes from. The anchor, windlass setup, it's going to be a Mantis again. Regardless, we've had wonderful success for that. We've had a Manson Supreme, we've had a Rockna before, both great anchors. But we've really liked our Mantis, the way it sets. So we will end up going that route. We're leaving the 55 pound on elements. We will do at least a 65 pound on the new boat. May go a little bit higher than that, but that's the number that you see here for the Mantis. The Fortress, right now we have a FX55, which is insane size for this boat. It's really, really, really big, but it's a massive, massive storm anchor. Whoever buys elements, we'll talk to them and see if they necessarily want that. We do have an FX23, which is appropriate for this size boat as a storm anchor. So they may not necessarily want the 55, and if we can, we'll move that over. If not, we may buy it from them, or we may just buy a used one as well. But we will have a Fortress on this boat. They're phenomenal anchors, and I put the number in there for the rode for that, for the stern anchor. For the chain and rope rode on elements, we have 275 foot barrel of 5/16 G4 is what we used on this boat. We will be going to a shorter chain on the next boat. A lot of it's weight, of course. With a performance catamaran, you don't want a ton of extra weight there. The other thing too is even anchoring in Norway, which is, deep, deep water, it's not too often that you go out past 150 feet of actual chain. So most likely the rope rode won't even be in service often anyway. And when it is, it's usually, unless you're in the South Pacific, it's usually not in a position that the rope is going to chafe or get on coral or anything like that. So it makes sense for this type of boat to go with 150, maybe even do a little bit less, but probably going to be 150 feet of chain and then rope for the remainder of that. Windlass, it's what we have right now. Good brand, good quality stuff. We may end up going that route again. We may end up doing something else. I don't know, but at least give you an idea of what size we're looking at, what kind of pricing we're looking at for that. The windlasses are something that, if you do find one with an issue with it, they're typically fairly easy to rebuild. It's a pretty simple mechanical item. Little machine work, so on and so forth. You can bring one to basically back to new type of thing for a really, really low cost. Maybe we'll end up doing that. It depends on how the rest of the boat gets finished. If we do feel like using some used parts on the boat and refurbishing them, or all new for everything. It's a way to save money. I don't know if we're going to go that route, but we'll see again at that time. The nav lights. So the nav lights, there's already the masthead light, the tricolor on that. It also has a streaming light already factored into the mast cost. So that that's already there. I base it on just the aqua signals. We've used the 33 series and the 34 series previously. They're sealed LEDs. They've been great. We haven't had any failures with them. They've been phenomenal. We'll use that again just because we know that they work, and they're not expensive at all. They're pretty inexpensive actually, for what they are. So we'll end up doing that. I have a high number in there. We won't be spending anywhere close to that. So that's a big fudge factor in that one too. Interior lights, it is, you can't see them right now. You can see these guys, but you can't see the other lights. We've used before, in Elements, we actually use their aluminum machined. They're actually made for interior cabinets in houses, but they run through a converter, a DC converter, to bring them down to 12 volt. And they are phenomenal. They are absolutely awesome. They're really, really cheap. They're well machined, great LED, good color that we actually like, a nice warm white color that we like. And they actually use tinned wire with them, which you don't even get on typical marine grade lights. So it's a step above that actually. The circuit board in it's well done. It's potted, sealed, everything like that. They should be marine grade, but they're actually used just in cabinets and under cabinets and those types of things in houses. We get them on eBay. We bought them on Amazon actually. A 5-pack is I think $35 currently. We will need a bunch of them, but that's reflected in this price. On Elements right now, we had bought all of them, installed them. We ended up buying an extra 10 or 15, I think. We have extra storage stored away just in case, because we didn't know how long they were going to last. Right now we're on year 4 with them, and we haven't had a single failure. They are performing just like they did brand new, so we still have all of those. We will be purchasing a new set of backups for the new boat. We'll leave these here with Elements just because of the fact they're a form factor. So they are, I think, 20 or 32 millimeter that you cut out. And the new ones are a little bit larger, so it's hard to cut that out. It's better just to, once you have something you like, buy a bunch of them because they will change on you. So that's what we'll use here. Stainless steel switches. Buy that and the gross pretty much of those. We bought, I think, 40 of them at the time. So we have a bunch of extra of those already. That's figured into this. Lighting can be very inexpensive if you're not going with the full marine grade stuff. We will do these goosenecks again, this type of setup. We do like that. But that's going to be reserved for the nav desk itself or the computer desk itself. And then we'll have cockpit light, and that is about it for extra lighting. So not a huge expense there. Galley is one area we think we can save a ton of money. We are finally going to step up and go to an induction stove. So instead of having propane, we will do an induction. That relates to why we want to go with lithium. It's difficult to run induction off of a lead acid battery. It can be done with, if you go to better designs or more expensive lead acid batteries, but we're not going to go that route. We'll just do straight to the lithium ion, and that should work out well. Convection oven, we don't use an oven a ton anyway. It'll be adequate. Won't be perfect. It's not as great as, I think, cooking with a gas for at least the oven part of it, but it's inexpensive. It is something it's easily replaceable as needed, and it works. It'll work with our system. Again, we don't have to have propane then. So that's 2 ways that we're saving money. We're doing, I think, a safer setup. It allows us to have some redundancies built into it as well. So it's just, I think, will be a good option, and it's just the way that everyone else is going anyway now too. But refrigeration, I have marine units added in here. They're nice, they're beautiful. We've used a similar system previously. We're using a Vitrifigo Danfoss compressor right now. It's worked out well, no problem with that. But we may end up going that route, but we may also end up doing a household refrigerator. They have skyrocketed in efficiency. They are so much better, and especially if you get one from Europe, the European standard. It's a smaller refrigerator, of course, than a US refrigerator, but the numbers of what people are actually obtaining on boats with the European fridges, with the AAA fridges, is incredible, absolutely incredible. They're getting to the efficiency level of a small built-in unit. And so I would love to go that route. We'll see how the layout works for it, and see about availability. Of course, it's difficult to ship one from the UK or from mainland Europe to the US, so we don't know exactly how it's going to play out. We are going to wire this boat for 230 or 240, 50 hertz. It's it's just so much more convenient when the areas that we sail, Caribbean, and into, we plan on coming back across the Med again. It just makes more sense to wire it for that than to wire it for US at that time. So we're going to need to get our induction stove and convection stove from Europe anyway. The Victron for the charger and inverter we'll need to get from there too. All those things, the adapters, so on, we'll have to be able to get from there. So at that point, we're already gone that far. It can make sense to do a household unit in these boats. So we'll touch on that when we get closer to that point. Pumps, again, based on what we've used on Elements, we know we will have an additional head. Of course, we'll have an additional shower, a little bit longer runs for that. But there's enough extra capacity on the pump that we currently have. We'll end up going that route, and that allows actually for additional spare. We've just had good luck with them. We can buy them inexpensive, a lot of times off of eBay even, inexpensively, the whale pumps, and so we'll end up going that route. 2 water tanks. We could build in water tanks, and then coat them with a waterproof epoxy or a tank potable water epoxy. We'll just end up going with the plastic ones that you can get. This is based off of what I got from Defender. You can order any size you really want now at this point, and it's just price-wise, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to not just buy these units. Gain a little bit of space by building it into the boat, but all the other factors in it just make sense to go this route. Plumbing, we'll just do a PEX system again. Same basic setup that we used on Elements. I will probably switch over to metric this time, again, because of where we're going to be sailing this new boat. We have run into it when we carry a lot of extra spares of PEX, and the fittings and all this stuff. But of course, whenever you want to do something, it's always that one fitting you don't have, and all you can find here are metric or British standard for pipes. So it will be better just to do that from the ground up as a metric system. So we'll end up doing that route. The exterior of the boat, the hatches, of course, are an expensive part of that. We will hopefully find a good discount on those because that's a huge chunk of money for hatches, but we want quality, of course, too. Been very happy with the Vetus, the one that we have. So we'd love to go that route. We'll see again what's available at that time when it's time to order hatches. The deck plan calls for, I think, 8 hatches. We added 2 extra over the rear berths just to give a little bit better ventilation there, in appropriate size for that area. That's where we got that number. The windows for around the cabin, I have cast acrylic numbers, so what we've used on Elements. Oram suggests polycarbonate. You have to get a scratch resistant, UV scratch resistant version of it. It's fairly expensive. You can get offcuts and stuff and kind of piece the system together to try to bring down that cost. We'll see. Again, not committing to cast acrylic, not committing to Lexan or polycarbonate either. We'll see when we get closer to that point. The cleats, on Elements, we've got what we replaced the cleats with. We ended up upgrading the cleats on that. There's a pretty healthy markup on those usually. You can usually get a pretty good wholesale number on those things. So that's what that number is based on. Lifelines, stanchions. Stanchions, we'll end up just doing G10, so fiberglass rods. And cut those down and make the stanchions out of that. Part of the reasons why we're not using tubes and we're using solid rod is, of course, for the extra strength of it, but also because we can machine a shape into them. G10, if you get machinable G10, you can machine a taper into it with a nice head on it. It looks pretty. You just put them on a lathe. It's not that big of a deal to make. And I just like it a little bit better. So we'll end up probably going that route. So that's where that cost is. Lifelines, we'll end up doing Dyneema again. Amsteel Blue is usually inexpensive enough, so we'll just end up going that route, and you can do it on the boat. It's real simple to do. Splicing takes seconds. So we'll do that, of course, on that boat as well, or the new boat as well. Trampoline, we'll get the raw netting and make the netting ourselves. So you get it, it's already pre-sewn or stitched that way, and then you just make the nice edge along that. So not a huge thing, takes a little bit of time, but saves you a lot of money over a production unit. So that's that number figured in there. Latches, locks, self-explanatory. It's stuff that we've used before. Cockpit cushions, same thing with the interior. This is based on numbers that we've gotten from Foam Factory. We've used them before. It's what I'm sitting on right now is foam from that. I know exactly what sizes will be necessary on the new boat. So I pulled up that number, looked at that. That is what you see here are the numbers for that. Dry fast foam, so it water leaks through it and doesn't stay wet in the cockpit. Little hard, but it works out fine. Interior, it's multi-layered stacked foam for the settees. For the mattresses are a specific type of foam for that. I have that all figured in there. The Sombrella for the exterior, the numbers come from buying remnants. What we did on Elements is we bought sections of extra Sombrella, typically up to about 20 yards will come within a roll, and you get a massive discount on that. We have a specific wholesaler we used before for it that has a huge supply of it, but if you just go to eBay and you look up Sombrella remnants or rolls, you can see examples of it. The dye lots aren't the same usually, but if you have enough to cover one specific area and then there's a separation between another one, you can't tell the difference at all. At least I can't tell the difference at all, nor can Jess, an important one. So it's not a big deal, but it does save a huge ton of money. So we'll do that. We'll do the same thing on the interior as well, use the remnants. We ended up this is normally, I think, $130 or $140 a yard. So one of the most expensive fabrics, very expensive fabric. We ended up getting this, I think, for it was $15 or $20 a yard. So huge savings again, eBay. So simple, easy thing. So that covers those things. Interior flooring, no idea what we're going to use at this point. This is just a catch-all for if we use a vinyl, a teak looking vinyl flooring. There's a lot of options, a lot of cheaper options out there, and we'll see when we get closer to that point. But that's a long ways away, so we'll worry about that later. Cushions we talked about, latches, again, stuff that we've already used on Elements. So something we do have experience with it 4 years out. Some of them have been actually on here 5 years. Some of them we had on Serendipity before and cruised with, so 8+ years. Well, 10 years, I think, or 12 years of use within that. So we do have a good example of what has worked for us at least, and we'll carry that over to the new boat, of course, as well. Heads, toilets, those are not extravagant models. It is factored in one electric, most likely in the guest side, because it's just easier for everyone to use instead of having to explain. Just tell them to push a button, it's fine. Probably do a manual head over on our side, which is cheaper, and it's just the reliability of it is phenomenal, so we'll end up doing that type of thing. So that's where those numbers come from. 2 holding tanks are figured in there, just generic 25-gallon holding tanks. Have that in there. All the hoses needed, the seacocks needed to get to that as well. The seacocks you'll probably think is a little light, and the hose is a little light. There are for the seacocks, there's a lot of wholesale out there for those as well. If you search around, eBay, again, a great source for that, to get the force bar Marlon seacocks really cheap. Well, half the price of what the typical number is. That's where those come from, and there's a bunch of them out there, so it's not a problem in buying them at any point. There's that. The hoses, we have that figured in there. Again, the shower sump, what we've used before, and it is ridiculously reliable. Bilge pump, I don't have rent down there, but that's actually back in the plumbing section, so that's fine. Electronics is a big variable. Big variable. We have no idea how we're going to equip this boat, how many extras we're going to have on it. Elements, we originally planned on not initially at least installing a chart plotter. It ended up being cheaper to buy a chart plotter because it controlled the autopilot than buying a separate head unit that controlled the autopilot. So we had a chart plotter. Once you have the chart plotter, you need to buy the chart chip. So we bought the chart chip. Once you had that, it was cheaper to just then add the radar at that point. So we added the radar. Kind of just keeps adding up. All great stuff, but it ended up adding to that budget right away. With this boat, we don't know. We don't know how we're going to equip it. We do know VHF, of course, gotta have. We will, of course, have all the instruments in place, so things are showing wind speed. Very important on catamaran, especially with us getting used to it. So we want to make sure we have accurate setup and easily to read displays, because there is hard to gauge it sometimes, the wind speed. Depth, of course, is going to be important. So we will have that installed no matter what. AAS, we will have a Vesper AAS. Again, great unit with the Wi-Fi, so it ends up going to a tablet or to our phone or whatever, and tells us all of that information. So all the stuff that's on the instrument display and AIS information, of course, will be displayed right on our phones and iPads or whatever. So that's how we have that figured in. Again, the wiring's already in the mast for the VHF, so we don't have to add that cable. We just have to run the cable from the mast base to where the VHF will be, and that's going to be, I don't know how long a run that is, but that's not a big deal anyway. So that's figured in there. Antenna, again, isn't that expensive, of course. Strangely, they run the cable for it in the mast, but I don't think the antenna was quoted in there, so you got to buy that separate. Wiring, I did add extra for the wiring in there, but the NEMA 2000 N2K system, with it, when you get the instrument package and you get the autopilot package, typically they have a bunch of extra stuff in there, and it's enough to get you a lot of the way. And then you just need to buy a few extra things if you need to do a longer run here or a longer setup there. Again, the mast already has one wire ran in it for N2K, and so that's already preset there, so we don't have to worry about that long run or the expensive run. Everything else is just kind of basics there. So again, the electronics, that's going to be a big variable. We don't know until the end. We won't know what that number is going to be, and that's going to impact our budget. We'll probably at some point we'll add a chart plotter, of course. We'll add radar, of course, later on too. Just don't necessarily need it to launch the boat, and if we're struggling with the budget, then at that point those items will probably be off until we can buy them later on. So we'll see. Really, the big thing is that so we end up getting to total, but everything figured out, we end up a little over 200,000. Again, we can't afford that right now. We don't have that money. We do have to sell elements. We do have to hope that the market rebounds a bit. That's going to be a big thing for both the used boat market for elements value and for the stock market, because we are, as of today, invested again, a lot of it. So we'll see how that all plays out. And we will have to, of course, earn some money to get to that point to be able to pay for it. We do hope that we can get some discounts for the supplies, just as a generic supplier discount, because we are building a whole boat. And also the fact that hopefully if we get enough views in the videos, we can entice some suppliers to help us out as well. And of course that will be reflected in that too. And we will share that information with you as well. You have to disclose that type of stuff anyway, but we will give you those details, so then you know, if we say, okay, we ended up spending 170,000 on the boat, whatever it is, you'll know that we got 30,000 knocked off because of this, or whatever that number ends up being. So we will share that information with you as much as the manufacturers allow us to do that. But so that's the plan at this point. But it's still a lot of money. But when you compare it to what these boats compete with, not a fair comparison. I mean, a lagoon, a 45-foot lagoon, is a way bigger boat, way more luxurious boat, has a lot more toys on it and stuff like that. So it's a hard comparison there. It's better to compare this to a 40-foot lagoon. It's about the same amount of living space, actually it's probably a little bit less, but close to a 40-foot lagoon, 40-foot foam Peugeot. You look at the pricing for that with comparable equipment, and we're talking 300,000 less. So it's a inexpensive. It's expensive. Don't get me wrong, it's very expensive, but it's in comparison, it is significantly less than what a comparable production boat would be. And really, what they more compete with is they more compete with the higher end boats. Now, of course, they don't have all the tricks. They don't have the carbon fiber mast. Of course, you can add one. They don't have any of those extra type of things. So it's a basic version of an Outremer, is kind of what we're seeing here. You can make it as loaded as you want, of course, but that's kind of how I see it. And we're talking about a significant cost savings then between those two boats. Are we going to recoup every penny or every hour that we put into this and pay ourselves a good wage? No, that's just not in the case. But again, we want to build a boat. That's the goal, is to have that experience of actually building this boat from the ground up. We don't want to just write a check for a boat and sail away type of thing. So it's part of our hobby. It's part of the things that we do enjoy, these projects and type of things. So how you value that, how you put a dollar amount, I don't know. What we do know, and what we hope to continue that, is that when it is time for us to sell it, we hope the boat to be worth a little bit more than what we spent on it. It doesn't owe us anything past this 200,000 mark, if that's what we end up spending. So if we can get back what we paid for it after using it for 5 years, or we hope 10 years would be the goal, is to keep the boat for 10 years, then great. We're extremely happy. We're ecstatic at that point. Again, we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. These are the numbers that we have set now, and again, these are the numbers that we bounced off of multiple people, people with knowledge that actually know what they're doing with this type of thing, and they've all said that it's obtainable. It's something that you have to be smart. You have to stick to the plans to do it, but as long as we do that, that's where we're at.
I've got Georgie outside making a bunch of noise. She wants to get let in. But wow, yeah, just over $200,000 if we go with the Oram start to finish, if we stick to plans. So that is pretty cool. And once we get into this a bit more, again, we'll start looking at all of the different designers. Of course, cost is going to be a big factor on which of the three plans we choose. But now you at least know the kind of like the bottom one, the most basic, what that would cost. So let us know if you have any questions on what Matt went over. I know there's a lot. And let us know if there's something specific you want us to cover in the next video relating to the catamaran build. And we'll get working on that for you. But otherwise, stay happy and healthy, and we'll see you soon.